listening to A Scary State, and this week we're talking about New York. So, Lauren?
Yes, Kenzie.
Let's get scary.
You do this every New York episode.
Do I really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then you go, I can do it because my mom's from New York.
Well, I was going to say that.
When I was doing my case today, actually, I was like, I wonder if your mom knows about it or if she was aware of it as it was happening.
We can always ask.
It was a little before her time, I think.
When?
The 40s.
So she wasn't even alive.
I know, but the ramifications of it are what I was wondering if she knew about. Because it kept going. So, we'll get to it. It was an urban legend. So I was wondering if she knew the urban legend.
I'll have to ask.
You'll have to.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious.
You know what I was thinking about the other day?
What?
And it makes sense because my mother was on a jury before, so this is where it connects.
Okay.
That for people to write in for their listener stories, instead of, it doesn't just necessarily have to be like a creepy situation or whatever. If you were a juror on like a really interesting court case,
yes,
feel free to send that in.
We want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely want to hear about it.
My mom was on one and it was for like a homicide.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Was the guy guilty?
Yeah.
Ooh.
It was like one of those ones where it's like they finally were able to get the DNA all these years later.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything anyone has, we want to hear.
Yeah. So it dawned on me because my friend's sister is currently a juror, but hers is like some legal like document
boring
contract thingy.
My coworker got called for jury duty the other day and she was like, this sucks. And she had to go to the whole thing. She got dismissed before she got called into the courtroom or anything.
Nice.
But apparently once you get called, you're good for 3 years. You won't get called again.
Nice.
Have you ever been called? Summoned?
I've been summoned.
Have you really?
Yeah. Which I think it should be a federal law that between the end of August and the beginning of June, no public educator can be summoned for jury duty.
Yeah.
Because it sucks not knowing whether or not you need to take off.
Well, yeah.
You don't want to make unnecessary subplans.
Yeah, yeah.
But you kind of have to just in case.
Because you can't call until 24 hours before to see if you even need to show up.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to show up, I take it. Nice.
Yeah.
My friend got summoned for grand jury duty and he slept through it. His alarm on accident because he had been on the West Coast and he came back over to the East Coast. So his time was all messed up.
That sucks.
And so he fell asleep and he had an alarm set, but he slept through his alarm. So he woke up when he should have been at the courthouse. He's like, oh my God. So he called them. He's like, I am so sorry. Here's the situation. They're like, you're lucky because your number was you aren't needed. And I was like, bud, you could have gone to jail.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I haven't been called yet. Knock on wood. We'll see.
So tell me about New York. Oh, I feel like I should say this disclaimer, just given the state of the world. Laura and I have recorded 2 episodes back to back. So the Florida episode that you heard last week, this New York episode, we are recording right afterwards.
Yes.
So it's not a week has gone by like we normally do.
Correct.
So if something happens in the next 2 weeks that we don't comment on, that's why.
That's why. Yeah.
So
I feel like people know us well enough that if something happens, we're going to comment on it.
Right.
So if we don't, it's because it either hasn't happened yet at the time of our recording or we just don't know about it.
Yeah. So we are recording this on Sunday, March 9th. And it will not go out until 2 weeks from now.
Right.
So if anything happens, which 2 weeks is a long time.
It is a long time.
I'm sure lots will happen.
So much is going to happen.
That's why we didn't say nothing, because it didn't happen yet.
Right.
So I just felt like that was a disclaimer we needed to put out.
I know.
there.
You had this thing that popped into your mind. You're like, I need to let people know.
I thought about it the other day.
No, I think it's smart.
Yeah. I was just like, I feel like so many things are happening all the time.
Literally, something new happens every 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, that he finally signs the executive order for the Department of Education. Everyone who knows me from listening to one episode
right.
would know that I would be having lots to say.
Right.
So if that happens and you don't hear me say anything, this is why.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Just covering our bases.
Good. I think that was important.
Thank you.
All right. So into New York. The Straw Hat Riot of 1922, though it sounds absurd, a riot over hats, but for 8 brutal days in September of 1922, the streets of New York became a war zone. The crime? Men daring to wear straw hats past the unofficial but deeply enforced seasonal cutoff date, September 15th. What began as a childish prank, gangs of teenage boys knocking straw hats off the heads of working men, quickly escalated into something far more violent. Groups of roving hat snatchers began swarming through the streets, assaulting anyone who dared to wear a straw hat. Workers were dragged from docks, beaten in the streets, and left bloodied on the pavement, all for a simple choice in headwear. The Straw Hat Riot laid bare just how easily social norms, even something as trivial as a fashion rule, could become an excuse for mob violence. The city, already a powder keg of class tension, was only too eager to explode. What started as fashion policing became a brutal demonstration of who belonged, who didn't, and how fragile civility truly was.
Isn't that crazy?
That's weird.
Over.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, why was there a cutoff date for when you could wear the hat?
Because straw hats were like acceptable for like summer and things like that. But I guess like past September 15th, it was supposedly not going to be warm enough for that to be acceptable. It's kind of like the whole no white after Labor Day.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Why is the white after Labor Day thing?
I think the same way the straw hat thing was.
What, that white's like a summer color?
Yeah.
Huh.
But
Weird.
now it doesn't apply because no one gives a shit. White is like black, but white.
I'm sorry, what?
Like,
Explain that.
like the color black is like a neutral color.
Okay.
It is a base color. You can put
Okay.
it with anything.
Uh-huh.
So is white. It's just the opposite.
Okay.
It's white, not black. It makes sense. They're like, they have the same job, but one's black and one's white.
Okay.
Like white reflects all the light and black absorbs all of it. But it's still like two base colors that you put with other colors.
Keep going. Yep.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
It does, Louise. It's just not the way to say it.
I know. But it makes sense. I get what I'm saying.
And that's all that matters,
You
Kenzie. Just over a decade earlier, on March 25th, 1911, fire engulfed the upper floors of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in the Greenwich Village neighborhood. Inside, nearly 500 workers, mostly young immigrant women, were packed into cramped workstations, cutting and sewing clothes under the watchful eye of overseers. When the fire broke out, it spread with terrifying speed, fueled by piles of fabric scraps and wooden tables. Panicked workers ran for the exits, only to find many doors locked, sealed by factory owners to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks. Wow. The fire escapes were poorly maintained and collapsed under the weight of desperate workers trying to flee. In the end, 146 people died, many of them jumping from windows to avoid being burned alive.
Yeah, this era, the early 19th century, is like also
Awful.
before like child labor laws too. So
Jeez.
working conditions were no bueno.
It's
That's why we
like
have unions.
It's like the uranium women. Was it uranium? The ones who they worked on pocket watches, and
Oh.
the watches had to be done. They used like uranium or radium or one of those like chemicals, like
Yeah.
bad things,
Yeah.
radioactive things. And to get the perfect points on their paintbrushes, they would put it in their mouth to get the perfect points. Well, they didn't know that this stuff was radioactive, and over
Oh my
time,
God.
yeah,
Major
radiation poisoning.
Wow.
And sickness and stuff. And like the women years down the road started to like develop really, really bad illnesses,
Oh,
and they
I'm
started to
sure.
die because they're ingesting this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't think of how much it is over time, but like,
Right.
yeah.
That's
so
crazy.
it's because they didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
OSHA is a thing for a reason.
yeah.
I love seeing those videos though, where it's like, usually it's a construction site. And they're
Yes.
like dicking around with the equipment and everyone's just in there like talking about OSHA.
Yes.
It's just so funny.
Ugh. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was more than just a tragic accident. It was the horrifying consequence of unchecked corporate greed, lax safety regulations, and the brutal indifference to immigrant laborers.
Huh. Sounds oddly familiar. Almost feels like now.
It could be what we're reading, like today's newspaper.
Correct.
The disaster shocked the nation and led to major labor reforms, but for the families of the victims, it was too little too late. The factory may have burned down, but the ghost of that day lingered in the city's air for years to come. Typhoid Mary. She was a cook, a woman moving from house to house, preparing meals for wealthy families across New York. But Mary Mallon carried something with her that no one could see: typhoid fever, a disease she didn't feel herself, but one she left in her wake like an invisible curse. Between 1900 and 1907, Mary worked in kitchens across the city. In her time at 7 different households, nearly 24 people fell ill, some fatally. Public health investigators traced the outbreaks back to her, the first known asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever. Mary was taken into custody and placed in quarantine, her case a medical mystery and a public health nightmare.
It's almost like people who are asymptomatic
Can
still.
Wow,
Interesting.
that's shocking. But if she doesn't say she has it and doesn't check for it, then she doesn't have it.
Well, she probably didn't know to even check for it.
They let her go on the condition that she never worked as a cook again.
Oh.
But Mary was poor and cooking was all she knew. Under fake names, she slipped back into kitchens and the sickness followed her until the health department found her again, this time after a deadly outbreak at a maternity hospital.
Okay, see, now that's fucked, Mary.
Yeah.
At first, you didn't know.
But now you know.
But now you know.
How long does it stay with you?
I guess.
Like long enough to get a new name?
We'll read the next bullet.
This time there was no release. Mary spent the rest of her life in forced isolation, living out her days on North Brother Island, a pariah whose name became legend. Was she a monster, deliberately spreading diseases, or a scapegoat, punished for carrying a plague no one understood?
Both and.
The truth lies somewhere in between, and her ghost, they say, still lingers at the abandoned island, the cursed cook of New York City. I've definitely heard her name before.
100%.
But
she was definitely like in a drunk history episode.
But like, did she ever get cured?
Not that it doesn't sound like it if she spent the rest of her life in isolation.
But I wonder if like she cured at one point, but they just didn't know what it was. They just kept her isolated.
Not if she kept spreading it. Because obviously like they quarantined her and she went back out and she still gave it to people.
Okay. So this one happened in the early hours of March 13th, 1964 in Kew Gardens, Queens. A young woman named Kitty Genovese was walking home from her job as a bar manager when a man emerged from the shadows. He stabbed her once, twice, and when she screamed, the lights flickered on in nearby windows. The attacker ran, leaving Kitty bleeding on the sidewalk, but no one came to help. Minutes passed, the lights went out, and the silence swallowed her cries. The man returned to stab her again and again before raping her and leaving her to die in the cold March air. The murder was horrifying enough, but it is what came next that turned Kitty Genovese into a legend of urban apathy. Earlier reports claimed 38 people saw or heard the attack, yet no one called the police, no one intervened. Whether that number was accurate hardly matters. The story took hold. It became a parable of cold indifference, of a city so crowded, so detached, that a woman could be murdered in full view of her neighbors and no one would care. Psychologists gave it a name, the bystander effect, the phenomenon where the more people witness a crisis, the less likely any one of them are to step forward. Kitty's murder became more than a crime. It was a reflection, a mirror held up to the city asking, what would you do? Ever since I learned about that in psych class, I am now the person who, no matter if I think people have called, I will still call. And like, I've done it before. I'm like, I don't know if anyone's called about this, but. So sometimes I've gotten,
too.
oh yeah, we've gotten calls. And sometimes I've gotten, oh, nope, we haven't heard of this yet.
Yeah.
Yep, because I'm the same thing. I'm like, well, I'm not going to let the bystander effect take control.
Right. Usually I'll look around and be like, so is anyone going to call? No? Okay, I'll call.
Right. Yes. You need the person who's like, you call 911, you do this.
Right.
New York in the late 1980s was a city on edge, where crime rates soared, fear tightened its grip, and the idea of urban life came with an unshakable sense of danger. It was in this atmosphere, on the night of April 19th, 1989, that a young woman was found brutally beaten, raped, and left for dead in Central Park. The crime was unspeakable. A jogger attacked and abandoned in the darkness, but what followed was an even darker injustice. 5 teenagers, all Black or Latino, were pulled into the machinery of the NYPD, interrogated for hours without lawyers or parents present. Isolated, terrified, and desperate to escape, they gave false confessions, each one twisting their story to match what police wanted to hear. With no physical evidence tying them to the crime, the confessions were enough to seal their fate. They were convicted and sentenced, their names splashed across headlines branded as a wolf pack, predators prowling the city's heart. It took more than a decade and the confession of the true rapist, a man whose DNA had always matched, to expose the lie at the core of the case. The Central Park Five became a symbol, not just of wrongful conviction, but of the way race, fear, and a hunger for swift justice can conspire to destroy innocent lives. The truth eventually emerged, but the stain of injustice lingered, a haunting reminder of what happens when the need for a villain outweighs the search for the truth.
Amen.
Yup. That's a case I don't think I could cover.
Well, it's also really well known. So
it is really well known, so it's not something we would.
Yeah.
But that one's a tough one.
Anytime there's a wrongful conviction.
Yes. Yes, it's awful.
So bad.
New York.
New York, New York. Start spread.
Shocking that you are not on Broadway.
Oh no, I think there's a pretty good reason.
You can perform in front of me.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
why I did that just now, because to me, it's just you
It's
and
just
I,
us.
not the few hundred people that will listen to this.
Oh, but maybe this can be your big break.
No, thank you. I don't want anything to break.
I don't need that.
Mm-mm.
I'm fine being whole.
Correct. Yep.
Oh, well, this is gonna be a good one, as New York typically is. All right, Mackenzie, what New York tale do you have for me?
You know it will be a good story when the place is called the House of Death.
Yes.
Almost all the sources I looked at said this place had at least 22 ghosts, or 22 deaths, or both.
Okay.
I don't know. But there's 22 of something.
Okay. 22 is the magic number.
Some are your traditional spirits like a lady in white and a small child. But they also have some famous spirits like a former resident, Mark Twain.
Oh.
This house has seen a lot of death and a lot of bad luck during its 150 plus years of existence. Imagine walking down a quiet, tree-lined street, the brownstones standing stately and proud, hiding stories behind their grand facades.
Beautiful.
But one building in particular, 14 West 10th Street, holds a reputation unlike any other, known as the House of Death. This seemingly unassuming brownstone harbors a history drenched in tragedy, ghostly encounters, and even murder.
Murder.
Let's start at the beginning.
That's a good place to start, yes.
Very good place to start. It's also from The Sound of Music.
Oh.
And the line is, let's start from the very beginning. And anytime someone says, I don't know where to start, I want to sing that song so badly. But I keep it to myself.
Oh, okay.
Except for now in this moment. But that's also because I'm unmedicated.
Yeah, Mackenzie comes here today and she's like, I'm sleeping and I'm unmedicated.
That's why I said white is like black, but white. The color, not people.
Oh my God, Mackenzie, just go with your story.
Okay. Built in the 1850s, this grand home originally housed New York's elite, a symbol of wealth and status. But as the years passed, darkness settled into its walls. One of the most famous residents to grace its halls was none other than the legendary writer Mark Twain. There's even a plaque.
Oh, as there should be.
Yeah. Twain lived in the house from 1900 to 1901, and though he only stayed briefly, he reportedly has his own eerie experiences. He once claimed to have seen a glowing supernatural presence and even tried to shoot it, only for the apparition to vanish before his eyes.
Oh my God, yeah, let me shoot it.
But he's a staunch skeptic of the supernatural.
Oh.
So he didn't think it was that.
What did he think it was?
A rat. I'll explain.
Okay.
So apparently a piece of kindling was moving by itself near the fireplace.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, oh, let me shoot at the object because it's probably a rat or a mouse.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Carrying this wood that it could possibly need.
As they do. Sure.
And then there was like a few drops of blood.
Oh.
So, but he never like got up to like see what it was.
Well, then, sorry, you can't say one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. But Twain's time at this house was just the beginning. Over the decades, tenants and visitors alike have reported ghostly sightings. Some say Twain himself never truly left. Stop.
Sorry, I was stretching my feet and then it rubbed your leg.
A man in a white suit resembling the famed author has been spotted wandering the hallways, a cigarette dangling from his lips. So the large brownstone was eventually turned into apartments like in the 1930s. And a mother and daughter claimed to have encountered the author sitting near a window. A former super recalled, quote, on the ground floor back in the 1930s, a mother and a daughter, a young widow woman, were sharing the apartment. The mother, she comes into the living room one evening before the lamps are lit, and she sees a man with white hair, wild-like. He's sitting in a chair looking out the window, and she says, who are you and what are you doing here? And he says, my name is Clemens, and I got problems here I gotta settle. Because Twain's real name is Samuel Clemens.
Okay.
And then the spirit promptly disappears.
I don't think my first reaction, if I see some man in my house with like crazy white hair, I don't think my first reaction would be, hi, who are you? Why are you here?
That's why it was also the 1930s.
I'd scream.
Well,
I don't know what I would do, actually. I don't know if my fight or flight would kick in or freeze.
I feel like the assumption of bad intentions was not as prominent.
That's a good point.
Like, I feel like over time, some
Mhm.
people still hitchhike for the longest time until they're like, "Wait a minute, I could
This is
get
not safe.
murdered."
Yeah, that's true.
So Jane Bryant Bartell, she's famous.
Okay.
I don't really get what for, but apparently she was, like, really into, like, the whole, like, psychic supernatural stuff. So,
I like that, okay.
she moved into the infamous House of Death in 1957 and almost
Knowing it was infamous?
I don't know, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
And almost immediately she sensed a presence lurking behind her. She described it as, quote, a monstrous moving shadow that loomed over her. Yet when she turned around, nothing was there.
Don't like that.
Despite seeing nothing, she couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that she was not alone. This eerie sensation was just the beginning. Over the next 7 years, Bartell endured psychological torment and at times even physical distress. She claimed to have felt the itchy touch of unseen hands, belonging, she believed, to the house's former inhabitants.
Ew.
Stop itching.
Okay, just because we're recording the same day, the itch is still here.
Her chilling experiences were documented in her 1974 memoir, Spindrift, Spray from a Psychic Sea, written shortly before her untimely death.
Spindrift is a drink
There you go.
as well.
What is Spindrift?
It's a seltzer, but it's like a non-alcoholic seltzer.
I meant, what is the real Spindrift?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. From the moment she and her husband Fred moved into the top floor apartment, once the servants' quarters, she felt the house closing in around her. But with a housing shortage at the time, they had little choice but to stay.
I get it.
At first, the disturbances were subtle. The sound of phantom footsteps following her up the stairs, an inexplicable brush against her neck even when her hair was pinned up, and a sickly, rotting smell that would appear to vanish like wisps of smoke.
The one I don't like the most is the, when your hair's up, but feeling that.
Uh-huh. Then things took a darker turn. Shadows crept where no light should fall. Their dog would snarl at an empty chair as if some unseen entity occupied it. One night, a single shriveled grape appeared in the center of a pristine dinner plate, even though the couple hadn't bought grapes in months.
Ew.
Furniture moved on its own. The sound of shattering glass seemed to chase her through the building. And then there were the doors. One, a delicate... not doors. Sorry. Odors.
The doors.
Right letters, wrong arrangement.
Yep.
The odors. One, a delicate fragrance of ancient perfume. The other, what she described as a rotting miasma that left her gagging. Do you know what that is?
I've heard the word.
Oh, doesn't sound good.
No. I mean, if it's leaving her gagging, I can assume it's not.
Then Bartell saw him. A man. A figure. A vision. When she reached out to touch it, quote, "What was it I touched?" she later wrote. Quote, "A substance without substance. Chilly. Damp. Diaphanous as marsh mist or cloud of ether. I could feel my fingers freeze at the tips. They were numb, and yet they tingled. In the split second between contact and recoil, the scent came. Fragile and languorous. And sweet. Unbearably, cloyingly sweet." She's a
Ew.
writer, so
Well, yeah.
we gotta use crazy words. Desperate for answers, the Bartells enlisted the help of a paranormal expert and a medium. Almost immediately, the medium sensed the presence beneath the floorboards. 3, in fact.
Ew.
A young girl with curly hair, blue eyes, and a tiny nose. An aborted child, and a small gray cat.
Jeez.
Then, without warning, the medium fell into a trance. A voice, not her own, emerged. She had become Rennie Mallison, a 19-year-old woman born in 1848. She sobbed over her lost child. She cursed President Lincoln, blaming him for sending her husband, Henry McDermott, to his death in the Civil War. The paranormal expert had heard enough. He commanded the spirits to leave. "Go and leave these people in peace," he ordered. The response was immediate. The medium's voice twisted with rage. "Never! I will never leave here." Bartell recalled her screaming. "They will have to go. This is my home. I will never leave." After that night, the Bartells no longer felt safe. They packed up and moved away. But Bartell herself could never shake the feeling that the house had poisoned her.
Ew.
Dennis, a longtime resident of the building number 16, so the one next door.
Okay. So not the murder house or the murder building.
The house of death.
House of death.
The building next to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Has lived on the 3rd floor for over 20 years. Dennis did an interview with the New York Post back in 2012. A musician and photography enthusiast, he hesitates to share his experiences with the paranormal, admitting he feels embarrassed discussing ghost stories. Still, he can't ignore the eerie occurrences he's witnessed. Fleeting glimpses of women in long gowns drifting from room to room and inexplicable flickering lights. Does he think these spirits are some of the ones rumored to haunt the infamous House of Death next door? Quote, walls don't stop them from doing anything, he says. One night, years ago, while photographing a dancer in his living room, Dennis stepped out briefly. At least he thought he did. When he returned, he found his guest visibly shaken. She had just seen a woman in a flowing gown, trailed by a cat, glide into the room. Without hesitation, she grabbed her things and bolted. She wasn't the first to flee. Dennis admits several women have refused to return after experiencing something unsettling.
That sucks.
I have girls that would never come back, he says. Dennis lives just one floor below where author Jane Bryant Bartell once resided and believes in the chilling accounts detailed in her book Spindrift.
I wonder if, like, this ghost who's coming in is scaring these women away because they're not the right girl for the guy.
Maybe.
And she's like, I can tell, like, that's not going to work out. I'm just going to get him out of here now.
Well, but I think some of it was also like work. Because he was a
Oh,
photographer.
right. That sucks.
Yeah. The first time he got a copy, it was handed to him by a woman he met at the Strand while browsing for books on the occult. She claimed it had mysteriously fallen from the shelf into her hands. Over the years, Dennis has owned at least 10 copies, but for reasons he can't explain, they keep disappearing.
Ew.
But the House of Death has seen horrors far worse than simple hauntings. So, major trigger warning for, like, everything.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. In 1987, it became the setting of a gruesome and tragic crime. A man named Joel Steinberg, a disbarred attorney, was living in the house with his common-law wife, Hedda Nussbaum, and their illegally adopted daughter, Lisa.
Illegally adopted?
Illegally adopted.
Okay.
What happened inside those walls shocked the nation. Joel Steinberg was a criminal defense attorney based in New York City, known for his work in criminal law, often representing individuals accused of drug offenses. Despite his professional success, he had a dark and abusive private life.
They all seem to.
He lived with his partner, Hedda Nussbaum, a former editor and children's book author. Nussbaum had once been a successful writer and editor for Random House, which is crazy.
What's Random House?
Random House Publishing. It's like it's a huge publishing firm.
If I probably saw it at like the beginning of a book or something with this little like symbol, I would know what it is.
Yeah. Working on children's literature, but her career and personal life deteriorated over years due to Steinberg's abuse and control. Steinberg was physically and psychologically abusive towards Nussbaum, frequently subjecting her to extreme violence. Photographs of Nussbaum presented during the trial showed her disfigured face, missing teeth, and other signs of chronic abuse. Lisa was not Joel Steinberg and Hedda Nussbaum's biological child. In 1981, Lisa was born as Elizabeth Lisa Launders to her biological mother, Michelle Launders. Launders had placed her daughter for adoption, believing that Steinberg, as a lawyer, would handle the legal process and place Lisa in a loving home.
Oh.
Instead, Steinberg kept the child for himself without legal authorization. Lisa was raised in Steinberg and Nussbaum's home in Greenwich Village. Alongside Lisa, the couple also had an unnamed infant boy who was also allegedly taken under questionable circumstances. He was like, I think 18 months, toddler.
So they got him under questionable circumstances as well?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
The child was later placed in foster care after Lisa's death. On the night of November 1st, 1987, Steinberg savagely beat Lisa, leaving her unconscious on the bathroom floor.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh my God.
Reports later revealed that Lisa had been repeatedly abused throughout her life, suffering bruises, untreated injuries, and malnourishment.
Oh, baby.
After the attack, instead of getting medical help, Steinberg and Nussbaum reportedly freebased cocaine. Lisa lay unconscious for hours before Nussbaum finally called 911 early the next morning. Apparently, he also just casually went out for dinner too. Yeah.
Okay.
And Nussbaum was too afraid to do anything.
Yeah.
When paramedics arrived, they found Lisa barely alive, her body bruised and cold with a severe head injury. Steinberg initially refused to let the paramedics take Lisa, insisting she was fine. However, when authorities finally intervened, Lisa was rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital, where doctors found that she had suffered a catastrophic brain injury due to blunt force trauma. Lisa never regained consciousness and was declared brain dead on November 4th, 1987.
Oh my God.
She was removed from life support on November 5th. I think she was like 5 or 6.
Oh.
She was a baby. When the police searched the home, they found appalling conditions. Cocaine and drug paraphernalia scattered throughout the house, signs of long-term physical abuse in both Lisa and Nussbaum. The unnamed infant boy was dehydrated and neglected. Apparently, he was tied up to something and was sitting in his own filth.
Oh.
Hedda Nussbaum, who was found severely beaten and malnourished, was also taken to the hospital. She had broken ribs, untreated fractures, and facial injuries that left her permanently disfigured. Initially, she was considered a suspect, but after weeks of medical and psychiatric evaluation, prosecutors determined she was a victim of severe domestic abuse and battered woman syndrome. Joel Steinberg's trial began in 1988 and was one of the most closely followed cases of the time. The prosecution argued that Steinberg was a violent, controlling abuser who had beaten Lisa to death. They presented graphic photos of Lisa's injuries, testimony from doctors confirming that Lisa's death was due to blunt force trauma, testimony from Nussbaum, who detailed the years of abuse she and Lisa had endured. The defense attempted to argue that Lisa's injuries were an accident or self-inflicted. They also claimed that Nussbaum was an unreliable witness due to her history of drug use and battered women syndrome.
Oh my God.
In 1989, the jury convicted Steinberg of first-degree manslaughter rather than murder, a controversial verdict given the brutality of the crime, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He served 17 of his 25-year sentence and was released in 2004 on parole.
On good behavior.
Who the fuck knows? Upon release, he showed no remorse, insisting that Lisa's death was an accident.
Oh my God.
He never apologized to Lisa's biological mother or acknowledged any wrongdoing. Following his release, he attempted to resume his legal career but was disbarred, was rejected by the community, unable to find steady employment, lived a reclusive life, reportedly working odd jobs and refusing interviews.
Well, like, okay, let's say it was an accident. What happened? You still waited a whole day to call.
And you didn't call, your wife called, or your partner called.
Right. So even there, even if it was an accident, there is where you should be getting charges for.
That's, I think, where the manslaughter comes in. After the trial, Hedda Nussbaum completely turned her life around. She became an advocate for victims of domestic violence, speaking about battered women syndrome. She worked in women's shelters and wrote about her experiences. She legally changed her name and lived a quiet life out of the public eye.
Well, good for her.
Lisa's tragic death sparked national discussions about child abuse laws, domestic violence, and the need for better child welfare protections. Changes in the law included stricter adoption regulations to prevent unauthorized placements, better training for children protective services to recognize signs of chronic abuse, greater awareness of battered woman syndrome in legal cases.
Okay, so at least something.
Yeah. So residents and visitors have described hearing footsteps in empty rooms, feeling unseen presences, and even encountering strange, shadowy figures. Some have even been pushed or scratched by invisible forces. Paranormal investigators believe the spirits trapped inside are the echoes of the many souls who met tragic ends within its walls. In conclusion, God damn it. So is the House of Death truly cursed? Or is it just another relic of New York's dark past, whispering its stories to those who dare to listen? Whatever the case may be, 14 West 10th Street remains one of the most haunted locations in the city, a place where the past refuses to be forgotten.
Ew.
And you can't really go check it out because it's still private residences, so people live there.
Ew.
I mean, you can go to the
drive
outside,
by.
but you can't get in.
I would not want to live in a place called the House of Death.
Same.
American Horror Story, their very
We also
first...
would never be able to afford an apartment in Greenwich Village, but...
in American Horror Story, the very first episode or the first season is called Murder House. And it's about like a house where a ton of murders happened. And the family who moved in didn't know that it was something like that until they like saw a tour, like the tour of death going through and stopping at their house. So one of the main characters gets on the tour and then gets to hear about the history of her house that she didn't know about before she moved in.
That sucks.
No thanks.
And isn't that stuff supposed to be disclaimed?
I think it depends because we were actually watching Traders. We were watching the reunion the other night. And one of the people on it, I think, was on Selling Sunset or some selling show. But so pretty much she was like, oh, yeah, like she's like giving a description of the mansion. It was like a funny description. But she goes, yeah, and like I would have to disclose any murders that have happened here within the past 2 years. And I was like, oh, so it is a timeline. Like it's a time limit. So I think if it goes outside of that time limit, you don't have to disclose. But like in New Orleans, you have to explain if it's like haunted or not, which is so fun.
Yeah, they're probably all haunted.
Probably.
The city is so old.
My mom is shocked that I haven't been to New Orleans with you yet. And I said, I am too.
I literally have never in my entire life ever bought my own fucking plane ticket down there.
I'll buy my own. I just want to go with you.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, she hasn't taken me with her yet.
Well, a lot of times I also go down at Christmas.
Yeah, I know. But if you go on not Christmas, or if you go a couple days early, I go down a couple days early with you and then I just fly back for Christmas.
We usually go a couple days early.
I'm just saying. I'd love to go.
They would love to have you.
Aw.
Talk about you all the time.
Aw.
Yeah.
I'm a pleasure.
We'll make it work, I promise.
Oh, yes. And then we could see whatever death houses they have down there.
Well, we'd have to go to the Museum of Death.
Obviously.
So
That's not even a question.
we'd also have to go to the Voodoo Museum.
Obviously.
And yeah, I'll take you to all the spots.
Okay.
Get you a good po' boy.
Oh, yes. Oh, I would love that.
Get a couple drinks and walk around the French Quarter.
Oh, beautiful.
Go to Pat O'Brien's. You'd like it.
I think I would. I think I would.
And yeah.
But yeah, so murder house, house of death.
House of Death.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Well, yeah.
I thought you were about to say something super profound.
No, I felt like a hair was on my arm.
Uh-oh, like that lady who would feel the brush on her neck when her hair was pinned
I
back.
think my skin is sympathy itching.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, the things I do for you. What's spooky tea you pouring, Lauren?
For the second time through. We know this is going to happen every now and then. We know it. And we got 14 minutes in, and then it just stopped. So we have been spending the last hour trying to figure out how to free up space. Anywho, let's go through this for the second time.
Not that they'll know that.
They won't, but you will. But like you said, you're not going to remember most of what I said, so we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm a thespian. So I am a good actress.
So, I'm covering the urban legend of Cropsey
Yeah, we're still waiting for Mom's response.
to see if she knows Cropsey.
And the other guy that you'll get to.
And so Cropsey may sound familiar because Kenzie did cover Nell Cropsey in her North Carolina episode.
But no relation.
The North Carolina episode. But yeah, no relation. This one, completely different states, completely different people, just same name.
Honestly, it probably wasn't even worth mentioning.
No, it is, because people are going to be like, Cropsey? And I'll be like, yeah, but it's not the same one. So.
Just not me, people.
So this story begins back in the 70s and at summer camp because, of course, all the good urban legends begin at summer camp.
Of course.
So the story of the Cropsey maniac, as most do, begins with a family tragedy. George Cropsey was a well-respected judge. He had a wife and 2 children, all of whom he loved very much. George owned a small summer cottage along the shores of Maston Lake. And we looked it up. Maston Lake is kind of like not upstate New York.
But anything outside of New York City is upstate New York.
Even if it's below New York? Is there anything below New York City in New York? Oh, okay. So technically it's upstate New York. So in this cottage, his wife and children would spend the summer, and it was also near a summer camp. George had work back at home, but on the weekends, he would come to the cabin to spend time with his family. One night, 2 campers from the nearby camp snuck away from their camp's evening activities. They went down to the lake, built a fire, and started roasting some marshmallows.
Alone?
Yes. But not a good thing, because soon the fire was out of control and the campers couldn't put it out.
Gee, it's almost like they needed adult supervision. Like, I have no doubt was told to them.
Yeah, probably like, hey, we're going to do fun activities here. And they're like, nah, I'm going to roast my own marshmallows.
Yeah, no.
And you see what happens. The fire spread and eventually engulfed the Cropsey's cottage, trapping George's entire family inside, where they all perished. George unfortunately read about the incident in the newspaper.
That's the worst.
That's the worst.
I mean, it is.
Those who were with him when he read it said that he went completely white and disappeared. 2 weeks later, one of the campers from the nearby camp was found near the lake, chopped to death with an axe. The campers were soon reporting that they had been receiving threatening messages and some were coming back to camp hurt. The counselor started talking about closing the camp for the remainder of the summer to keep the kids safe, but that ultimately didn't happen. Instead, the owners of the camp decided to just have constant supervision of the campers, which I should have done at the beginning.
Right. I was just going to say, that could have helped prevent a lot of this.
They also had state troopers posted in the area and had each counselor sleep with either a knife, an axe, or a rifle by their bed.
That's crazy.
Most also started barricading the doors into their cabins. Then one night around 3 a.m., one of the counselors was startled awake by a scream in his cabin. He swung his flashlight in the direction of the scream and saw one of his campers bleeding to death. Standing over him was a man with chalk white hair and red bloodshot eyes.
Oh my God.
He was holding a long, bloody axe.
Ugh.
When the light of the flashlight hit the man, he ran from the bunk, but not before the counselor chopped at his leg with the axe that he slept with.
Nice.
What would be your weapon of choice? Would you want an axe?
No, a gun.
A gun?
I don't want
just
to have to get up close and personal.
straight up pistol?
Yeah. I don't want to have to do a lot.
So he chops at the guy's leg. The man escaped, but a trail of blood followed him into the woods. The state troopers were called, and they followed the blood trail into the woods as well. They called out for Cropsey to surrender, but they were met instead with crazed laughter.
Yeah.
Knowing his approximate position in the woods, they built a circle of fire around him. When the fire subsided, they searched the woods for his remains but found nothing. So the police closed a file on George Cropsey, presuming him to be dead. And
That's
like we
dumb.
learned with Bunny Man, never presume dead unless you find the body.
Correct.
It was said that on the evening of the anniversary of the death of Cropsey's family, you can sometimes see a shadow of a man limping along the shore of Maston Lake. And to this day, strange voices, threatening symbols, and even sightings of Cropsey are seen by campers.
Ooh.
See, I really want to know if your mom, like, ever at a summer camp heard about, like, the tales of Cropsey.
Well, we're not going to get a response
Ugh,
in a timely manner.
she's going to reply to you when you're already home.
Correct.
Kathy.
Or she'll forget.
Or she'll forget, yeah. Rumors say that Cropsey has a hook for a hand and has scars and burns covering his face and body.
The hash slinging, the slash slinging.
As these camp stories do, it circulated and was passed down from person to person, usually used as a cautionary tale to children on Staten Island.
Staten Island.
Staten Island. What is it? Yeah.
No, I know.
Oh, okay. I thought you were making fun of me for saying it wrong.
No.
They use this, they believe, as a way to keep children close and out of the woods, staying right where the parents could keep an eye on them. But soon the legend took a dark turn towards reality when children really were starting to disappear on Staten Island, and it all surrounded a man named Andre Rand. Did she reply?
Yeah.
What'd she say?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. Why? BTW, I'm sorry for the delay. I was napping. I feel like she's like me where like the recall isn't good, but she's also not going to be the type of person to like Google it to be like, oh, like, let me see.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to tell her, can you please Google it and see if it sounds familiar to
Like
you?
if it's because it's like also called the Cropsey Maniac,
Yeah.
you know, anything like that.
It'll be a phone call.
Slinging slasher. So, born Andre Racine, Rand was born on March 11th, 1944 in Manhattan, 2 days from the day we're recording. He and his sister grew up in a normal family where there appeared to be no sexual or physical abuse. But his father died when he was 14, and his mother was institutionalized in a psychiatric center in Brentwood, New York. He grew up in Ithaca and served in the Army during the early 1960s. Between 1966 and 1968, Rand, who is now going by the last name of Bruchette, worked at the Willowbrook State School of Staten Island, later renamed the Staten Island Development Center, as a physical therapy aide. He also worked some odd jobs and lived in rooming homes, shelters, and makeshift campsites. Those in the neighborhood typically described him as friendly, articulate, and well-read, though the police would describe him as an uneducated drooler.
That's so different.
It's because when he was talked to by police, he would pretend that he had no idea what was happening.
Oh.
To appear that
Yeah.
like just a hoodlum. His first real brush with the law was on May 5th, 1969. He was able, huge trigger warning for this case. A lot of trigger warning.
Mm-hmm.
Blanket. Yeah, okay. So, he was able to entice a 9-year-old girl from the Bronx to get into his car.
No.
So, he got this girl into his car and he drove the pair of them to a vacant lot. He removed his clothes and then hers, but thank God a passing police car interrupted the crime before it could go any further.
Thank God.
He was arrested and charged with attempted rape. He went to court where he pled guilty to sexual abuse and was sentenced to 4 years, but he only ended up serving 16 months in prison and was granted parole in 1972. At some point after his release, he legally changed his last name to Rand, now becoming Andre Rand as we know him today. Then he was arrested 3 more times, all before the end of the 70s for minor offenses, one of those offenses being burglary. At this point, on July 7th, 1972, Rand was painting an apartment building in South Beach in Staten Island when a 5-year-old girl named Alice Pereira vanished from one of the apartment flats.
I think you're saying it's Staten Island.
What is it, Staten Island?
Staten Island.
Oh, maybe I am saying Staten Island.
I think so.
Staten Island. Yeah, why am I saying it weird?
I don't know.
See, I got all in my head about it. Staten Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Staten Island. So she had been playing in the building's lobby with her brother. He briefly left her around 3:30 p.m., and that was the last time Alice was seen. At 6:15 p.m., her mother reported her missing. Her parents were divorced, so initially police thought that her father had taken her, but he was later cleared as a suspect. Police were unable to find any solid evidence to pin it on him, Rand, but made note that Rand had been at the house painting when Alice went missing.
Yeah.
So he's already on the police's radar.
Right.
So it's just kind of put a pin in him.
Yeah.
In 1979, he was accused of raping a young woman and a 15-year-old girl, but neither pressed charges. Then 2 years later, in July of 1981, Rand was brought in for questioning after 7-year-old Holly Hughes went missing in Port Richmond. But again, due to lack of any concrete evidence, he was released. Also in 1981, he offered a 9-year-old girl a lollipop and tried to get her into his car with him.
Jesus, he is the stereotype.
100%. Like, this is why you don't take candy from strangers.
Yeah.
When she refused, he proceeded to follow her home and searched for her while she hid under a rug.
Oh my God.
That's just so scary.
I don't remember that part the first time around.
Again, no charges were filed. By 1983, he was working at the Willowbrook State School of Staten Wow, Island as custodian. Staten. I don't know why. This is really tripping me up.
I don't know why either.
On January 9th, 1983, he loaded 11 kids onto a bus and set off for a 5-hour adventure that ended at the Newark International Airport in New Jersey.
That's crazy.
They spent the whole day eating White Castle hamburgers and watching planes land at the airport, which, not going to lie, that does sound nice because when we were younger, you know that like really small airport off of that one back road in Leesburg?
Mm-hmm.
We would go there when you could get like a lot closer to the runway, and it would like used to be like a super old abandoned dirt road. We would go up there and we would like eat dinner there and watch the planes take off and land.
You can do that at Gravelly Point.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been there though.
Me neither.
Oh, we should go.
Mm.
Maybe not with all the planes falling out of the sky right now.
No, there's statistically speaking, there's no more planes falling out of the sky than there has been recently. It's just in the news more.
I don't know if I believe that. But anywho, no parents had agreed to this little field trip he took them on or even knew that he was planning on doing this.
So I kidnapped them.
Exactly. No children were harmed, but Rand was arrested for unlawful imprisonment when he returned. He was convicted in March of 1983 and was sentenced to 10 months in jail.
That's it?
That's it. So this incident, though it was already he was an off guy, this kind of solidified it that there was something off about Rand. The parents in the area did not trust him. Rand would be seen hanging out with the kids in the neighborhood, though he was much older than they were. He would try to befriend the kids and try to go on walks with them or even take them to a local diner.
That's gross.
Yes. He only spent 5 months in prison before he was released in August. He was supposed to do 10. He did 5. That month, another young girl, 10-year-old Tyhisa Jackson, vanished on the island. It had soon been Staten Island. Yeah, okay. It had soon been suspected and word was going around that Rand had been responsible for a series of kidnappings and maybe even murders of children in the state. Nothing was ever able to be pinned on him, but if a child went missing, as was happening a lot during this time, Rand was always the last adult to have been seen with a child. People would accuse him, but there was never any proof to go off of. But that all changed in 1987 when, on July 9th, 12-year-old Jennifer Schwager disappeared from her home in Westerly. Witnesses reported that Jennifer had been seen with, you guessed it, Rand on the day that she disappeared. A 35-day search started in efforts to find Jennifer's body.
Wow.
While combing the area around Willowbrook State School, one spot caught the eye of retired New York City firefighter George Kramer. He came back with police and they found a shallow grave with Jennifer's body. Police searched the grounds.
How old was she?
12. Police searched the grounds for more evidence and stumbled upon one of Rand's makeshift campsites in proximity to Jennifer's grave. On August 4th, 1987, Rand was taken in for some preliminary questions about Jennifer's disappearance at the time, because they hadn't found the body yet, where he was then charged with her kidnapping. He was held without bail pending a psychiatric evaluation. With the discovery of her body, a first-degree murder charge was then added to his file. Good. So retroactively, he was then associated with the disappearances of Alice Pereira, 5, Holly Ann Hughes, 7, Tyhisa Jackson, 10, and Hank Gaffario, 22. So I wanted to take a moment to go over all of these in like more detail about the people who he's believed to be associated with. So I had already spoke about Alice Pereira and how he was suspected of being linked to her disappearance. So she was the one who brother last saw her in the lobby.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to about the part where we ended. So that's good. Then we have...
Now it'll be true shock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right at 13 minutes. Then we have Audrey Lynn Nuremberg, who was 18. So Audrey was last seen on July 5th, 1977, leaving her family's home in the Canarsie neighborhood of Brooklyn. She was heading out to get cigarettes at a shop 2 blocks away. She told her mom that she would be right back right after, but she was never seen again. Audrey did have hebephrenic schizophrenia, which at the time was a subtype of schizophrenia, but since in like the more recent editions of the DSM-5, whatever, has been back into schizophrenia, so it's just she has schizophrenia. But this condition had caused her to spend brief periods of time in several different healthcare institutions in New York between 1974 and 1977. During her disappearance, she was an outpatient at a psychiatric center in Brooklyn. The night before she went missing, July 4th, she had traveled with her family to Staten Island. I'm going to be so paranoid about this the whole time.
I'll just say it for you.
Yeah, I'll point to you. It's like corroborate.
Exactly.
So they had gone there to see a movie. The theater happened to be adjacent to a campsite that Rand had previously visited.
And how do they know it's his campsites?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
but it's just been linked to him somehow.
And these are just disappearances, right?
With Audrey, yes, was a disappearance.
Because the only body they found so far was
Jennifer's.
Jennifer's.
Mhm.
Everyone else that he's linked to is just a disappearance.
Correct.
Okay.
Then we have Shin Lee. She was a 44-year-old nurse who worked at Willowbrook State School. She was last seen walking towards her home around midnight on July 19th. She was then reported missing on July 20th, 1978. Lee was found in a shallow grave near a wooded area on August 6th, with her cause of death being strangulation. So here we have another body.
Okay, so she was found.
Similar to Lee was Ethel Louise Atwell, 42, who was last seen on October 24th, 1978 at the Willowbrook State School. So again,
that's where he works.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was a custodian here. So this is the second person who worked at the school who is now linked
Oh,
to
interesting.
him. Yeah. She worked here as a physical therapy assistant. It was around 6 a.m. when Atwell was in the parking lot about to head into the building. Two female employees already inside heard a male voice outside say, "Come on, come on." Atwell said, "No, you'll beat me." The two women then heard a scream. They immediately called the police, but were unable to provide many details as the parking lot was still dark and there were no streetlights.
Mm.
When authorities arrived, they found a tan pocketbook, one earring, one black shoe, 3 black coat buttons, and a part of a set of dentures next to the left side of Atwell's locked car.
I wasn't going to say it this time. I figured it was distasteful.
All of the items were determined to have belonged to Atwell. About 75 feet or 23 meters away in the woods, they discovered Atwell's car keys, but there were no traces of her. Lee and
So wait, they haven't found her? They just found her stuff?
Correct. Yeah, they found all of her stuff, found her car keys, everything, but not her.
In the parking lot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The keys were found really close, like in the wood line.
Yeah.
Lee and Atwell were suspected victims of Rand, though there has never been any concrete evidence found to officially link him to their disappearances/murder.
Mm.
So I mentioned it briefly, but in more detail, we also have the disappearance of Holly Ann Hughes, who was 7 when she disappeared on July 15th, 1981. Her mother had sent her to the Rich Portman Deli to purchase a bar of Ivory soap. The deli was only 2 blocks away, and around 9:30 p.m., Hughes was seen purchasing the soap. This is where we stopped, so this is all new for you.
Mm-hmm.
She never returned home and was never seen again. It was about a month after her disappearance when her mother, also named Holly, with the last name Setterholm, received a phone call from a man who identified himself as Sal. Sal told Holly that he was imprisoning the child and asked if they meet so that Setterholm could engage in sex acts on the camera, for the camera, in exchange for Hughes' safe return.
What?
Disgusting. Setterholm had already called the authorities at this point, so she went with the police to meet Sal at Penn Station in New York City. But shockingly, he never showed up.
Mm.
At some point, Setterholm identified Randy's voice as the voice of Sal. Witnesses also claimed that they had seen Rand's... I don't know why I said Randy. I'm sorry, Rand. Witnesses also claimed that they had seen Rand's green Volkswagen circle the business where Hughes vanished from. Rand was questioned and his car was searched, but they found nothing to charge him. Then on August 14th, 1983, which was only 12 days after Rand was released for one of his many stints in prison, 11-year-old Thaisa Jackson went missing.
Jeez.
She was last seen leaving the Mariners Harbor Motel on Forest Avenue in
Staten Island.
This part is a bit odd. Okay, but so August 14th at 1:30 p.m., Jackson's mother was asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Another resident of the hotel sent the daughter out to the Crown supermarket to purchase chicken wings.
Okay.
But she never returned.
Mm.
At 4:30 p.m., her mother woke up and realized that her daughter had been missing for 3 hours.
Oh my God.
She immediately called the police.
Yeah.
Her mother and uncle were ruled out as suspects after both passing lie detector tests. But Rand had a campsite at the Baron Hirsch Cemetery, which was less than 1 mile or 800 meters from the motel that Jackson was staying at. Her mother even said that she saw a man matching Rand's description loitering in the motel's parking lot the day that Jackson went missing. Rand had been interrogated, but no charges were filed. On June 8th, 1984, Hank Gaffario, a 22-year-old who lived in
Staten Island,
had gone out drinking. He went to Mugs Away, but was denied service. He then went to Spa Lounge in the Port Richmond neighborhood and stayed there until about 4 a.m. when the bar closed. He then was spotted at a diner with Rand shortly before he went missing. He was finally reported missing at 7 p.m. that day. It was reported that Gaffario had slightly lower intelligence with an IQ score in the 70s.
Ooh.
Gaffario lived with his parents and 3 brothers on the same block as Rand, was just around the corner from the Hughes' residence. So Hughes was Holly Ann Hughes, who also went missing.
Yeah.
His body still has never been found.
Oh my goodness.
In 1988, Rand was charged with the kidnapping and first-degree murder of Jennifer Schwager. So Jennifer, the one who he found.
Right.
But the jury was unable to reach a verdict on the murder charge. They were able to convict Rand of the first-degree kidnapping charge, though. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Could they do one and not the other?
Because they saw him with her, so they could say that, yes, he definitely kidnapped her, but they didn't have enough evidence to say that he also then murdered her.
I see.
So he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, eligible for parole in 2008 if not convicted for a second kidnapping.
Hmm.
So there was a documentary about Rand called Cropsey, and in it, some people, along with detectives, speculated that Rand may have been involved in Satanism and provided the children to be sacrificed.
Oh my God.
And I'm just going to quote this next part
But
from
he has
Wikipedia.
victims all age.
Yes. Yeah. So this part is right from Wikipedia. It was too much to try to paraphrase on my own, so it's just a straight quote.
Yeah.
Quote, there were people who also thought that Rand was not alone in the commission of his crimes, and many believed he was passing the children around to his friends in the underground network of homeless and mentally disabled people living in the tunnel systems of the former Willowbrook State School.
Oh my God.
So I'm not 100% sure where this renewed interest came from, but in January of 2002, authorities examined the yard of Rand's former
Staten Island.
home on Veerland Street, but they didn't find any evidence pertaining to the Hughes case. All right. Trying for the 15th time, but at least we made it somewhat through. Okay. So.
Maybe if I just don't look at you.
All right. So on September 9th, 2002, pretrial hearings began in
Staten Island.
where Rand was now on trial for the kidnapping of Holly Ann Hughes, who had disappeared 20 years prior.
Oh, wow.
Witnesses had been re-interviewed, some under hypnosis, in an attempt to gather more information. Prosecutors and detectives said that with all of this, they were able to piece together key evidence that had eluded them back in 1981 when Holly had last been seen at a local deli buying a bar of soap on the night of July 15th.
Right.
Rand's green Volkswagen had been seen that night circling the area. Witnesses also said that they had seen Hughes in Rand's car.
Oh.
So to this, he acknowledged playing hide and seek with Hughes on the day she vanished.
Ew.
But he had given her money to buy soap because she was filthy. But he claims that he left her before she vanished. Authorities determined that Rand's aunt lived in the same Port Richmond apartment building where Hughes's family was living in 1981.
Woof.
There were at least 10 people who were expected to testify at the trial, all speaking about how they had seen Rand with or near the outgoing and smiling girl who had lived with her mother. There were also inmates and officers from the Auburn Correctional Facility where Rand was being held who were expected to testify about things they had heard him saying, like, quote, kids entice me.
Ew.
Quote, you know me and Ted Bundy are alike in many ways. We both use Volkswagens. Bundy's thing was women. My thing is kids.
Ew, 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 ew.
Do you think the police could figure that out? And, quote, how could I get a book like that with kids? He said this referring to a pornographic book that a fellow inmate was looking at.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking too.
How the fuck he hasn't been ripped to shreds in prison?
Right. If you're saying all of these things, how has no one killed you?
Right. That's
like,
crazy.
even if you're in prison, you are still the lowest of the low in prison for that.
100%.
If Rand was not convicted in the Hughes case, he would have been eligible for parole on July 30th, 2012. So I looked into this because some of the articles I was reading were passed back in like 2002-ish.
Yeah.
So he was indicted for kidnapping Holly Hughes. He had already been in jail for the kidnapping of Jennifer and was eligible for parole in 2012. But with the indictment of the kidnapping of Hughes, that was handed up to the grand jury. In October of 2004, he was convicted of kidnapping Hughes, but was never charged with her murder due to lack of evidence.
Right.
So with this, he was sentenced to 25 years to prison, where he was already serving 25 years to life for Jennifer's kidnapping.
Right.
So he got even more time.
Okay.
So he will now become eligible for parole in 2037 when he will be 93.
Hopefully he will be dead.
I really hope so. So I wanted to go back to Willowbrook real quick. So maybe not the biggest shock, the Willowbrook State School of
Staten Island
didn't have the best reputation. It was meant for children who face difficulties in learning. But
yes, so let's hire a pedophile.
Right. But it wasn't a safe school that would help children in need.
No shit.
The school was described
You hired a pedophile.
The school was described as a hell where children were subjected to crimes and horrors.
Jesus.
Here, the children faced sexual abuse, corporal punishment, and unsanitary conditions. It was also home to what has been called one of the most unethical medical experiments on children in the U.S. In the name of hepatitis research, medical staff intentionally injected healthy children with the virus, many of whom became severely ill as a result.
Oh my God.
So it had opened in 1938 and served as a home for children with disabilities until it was used as an army hospital during World War II. During the war, it reopened as Willowbrook State School, supposedly to help children with developmental disabilities. It was intended to house 4,000 children, but by the 1960s, it was overcrowded with 6,000 residents.
Jesus.
Robert F. Kennedy had called it a snake pit in 1965. In 1972, a doctor who worked at Willowbrook was appalled by the conditions and treatment of patients, so he slipped a local reporter, Geraldo Rivera, a key to the institution.
I feel like I've heard that name before.
You might have. So Rivera snuck in and filmed everything that he saw there. He then broadcast what he saw to the world in a documentary titled Willowbrook, The Last Disgrace. It showed children living in filth with understaffed and untrained employees facing unethical treatments and punishments. In 1974, it was renamed to the
Staten Island
Developmental Center. It still took 15 years after the expose by Rivera for anything to be done to the institution.
What the fuck?
15 years! When it was finally shut down in 1987. And the staff who worked there, including Rand, were finally having to take account for their participation in the actions that took place here.
Good.
So it is a very real possibility that Rand was involved in many crimes while he was employed here.
Oh, I have no fucking doubt.
By the time Cropsey, Rand, was arrested in 1988, he was no longer a danger to the children, and this is where he will stay until 2037 when he will be eligible for parole. Cropsey became known as the Pied Piper of Staten Island.
You did it.
Yeah. So experts would say that his criminal history was an anomaly because his victims were generally just random strangers. According to the FBI, fewer than 100 cases of child abductions by non-family members were reported in 2001 among a population of 59 million children.
Wow.
And with more interest in these cases, Kenneth Lanning, a retired 30-year-old veteran FBI agent and national expert on missing and sexually exploited children, spoke a bit about criminals like Rand. He said that they are typically loners and losers.
Yeah.
Quote, they prefer children to adults, but lack the interpersonal skills to become a little league coach, a teacher, or a clergyman. People who easily befriend children. So they abduct young children because they are vulnerable and easy prey for them. He said that at least 95% are unmarried men who also have very few friends, and that of those child molesters who abduct children, only a tiny fraction will kill their victims. Quote, those are the most vile and cruel of this sick population.
Yes.
But his legend continued on. With Rand being in jail, the Cropsey legend morphed and soon said that Cropsey was actually being held at the Willowbrook Mental Institution on Staten Island. When the hospital closed down, he escaped and was now living in the woods. He is said to carry an axe, which sounds a lot like Buddy Man, and he snatches children who wander by.
Oh.
Many believe that Andre Rand was the source of the urban legend of Cropsey.
Oh.
So there you have...
Interesting. I was wondering when we were going to circle back.
There we have Andre Rand, who, they believe his crimes and everything that he did and all of that was because, so everything he was doing sparked the Cropsey legend. And kind of now we had an actual face to this boogeyman.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So when I covered this, I had heard of Cropsey before.
Yours were sadder than mine.
Yeah. I had heard of Cropsey before and I was like, oh yeah, this urban legend. Cool, I'll cover the urban legend. And it was no, it's a real person. I was like, oh no. So it took me a lot longer to do this case than I thought it would.
Well, despite the glitches, it was a good story.
Thank you.
Did a good job.
Thank you.
Even if you can't say Staten Island.
I don't know what's wrong. There are just some words. Staten Island. I think I want to say Stanton.
Yeah,
and I don't know why.
I don't know.
I mean, there is, past Harrisonburg, there's a place called Stanton.
I thought it was Staunton.
See, that's what everyone thinks. Everyone thinks it's Staunton, but it's Stanton. Which I think is what I'm getting it confused with.
Yeah, but that has an AU.
I know. Don't ask me why it's doing this in my brain. It just is. But thank you for listening. Thank you, Mackenzie, for just
falling asleep.
All of the glitches today.
My eyeballs literally cannot stay open anymore.
So that's our scariness. So stay scary.
And stay safe. And not sleep.